Um, I want to thank Maggie for asking me to participate in this meeting tonight. I didn't really know what to expect getting signed up for this, but I like how we can have a meeting anywhere at any time, and with the availability that we have through the internet, that anybody can join in it. Um, I said I did a conference call meeting one time talking about the traditions, and we couldn't see anybody on there, and it kind of felt like I was talking to nobody or dead air. So it's good to see that there's people here tonight that are looking for recovery, and welcome to everyone that identified as being new or coming back. We're glad you're here. And I guess I was thinking about what I wanted to discuss tonight, and I like to kind of put out the topic right off the bat. And I've been listening to a lot of speaker tapes recently, and a lot of the speakers have they talk on topic, so I'll qualify a little bit, and then I want to kind of get into the topic for tonight, which is going to be getting free of the bondage of self. And for me, that's that as an alcoholic, that's something that I've struggled with for my whole life, from the time I can remember. And when I was young, it was present. I just didn't know it, and I used a lot of different ways to cope with that until I found drugs and alcohol, and then that gave me a solution for the next 13 years of my life till I got sober when I was 28 years old. My sobriety date is July 29th, 2016. So I've got about 3.5 years, something like that. And I'm 31 years old. So I came into the rooms right after my 28th birthday. And like I said, drugs and alcohol were my solution for a long time. They kept me alive for a long time, and allowed me um, to live with all the stuff that was going on the inside. And I'm sure you can all relate at a certain point that turns on us, and that brings it, that brings us to places like Alcoholics Anonymous. It also brings us to institutions like jail and rehabs and detoxes and all the other places that we end up on the streets, wherever. And for me, when I came into AA, it was more of an emotional bottom, a physical bottom, a mental bottom for me. It was I still had a lot of the things, the exterior things in my life. I still had a job and a car and money in my pocket and things like that. But all the good people in my life had left. I was spiritually bankrupt. I had no real purpose in life. I was just living to drink and use, and that's all that I really had going for me. And that was the perfect place to be for me, to allow me to be willing to try something different. And Alcoholics Anonymous was something different. It's not anything that I had ever considered. It was definitely the last house on the block, and I like to kind of like paint a picture of that when I say that that phrase, "last house on the block." For me, that looks like walking down a street at night, and and I just picture these houses on both sides of the street, and you know, every house could have something else going on. You know, there's fires, and there's screaming, and there's chaos, and I'm still checking all those doors and seeing what's behind them. And even though I can see this house at the end of the block that the lights are on and there's people inside and they're laughing and they're talking, and that's the last place that I want to go, because that scares me. You know, I'm not used to um, communicating with people, and I don't know how to do that without having a drink in me. And so that, you know, that leads me to Alcoholics Anonymous eventually, after trying every other thing. And I related to, you know, to that in the book when I read it the first time, all the different ways that we try to control and enjoy our drinking, and changing our environment or our brand, or taking trips and reading books, and all these, you know, anything you can think of. um, I tried it, and we've tried it. And um, when I got to the end, I the only thing left to try was AA, and I jumped in. I picked up a book, and I started reading it after my first meeting, and I related right off the bat. The doctor's opinion made sense to me. It nailed me, and I I continued reading that book. I was continued going to meetings, and I ended up getting a sponsor about a week later, and he started taking me through the steps and reading the book with me, and one alcoholic sitting down with another like we're doing tonight is is something special that this program allows us to help one another. This, you know, it's described in the book, I think, as an altruistic movement, and that's really what it is. There's no leaders here. There's no, you know, fees or dues to pay. It's for fun and for free, and we help each other out, and it gives us that have recovered purpose, and allows us to stay sober by helping the next person. And I definitely took that to heart, and knew that if I continued on this path, that you know, I would do everything I could to help the next guy out. And getting getting into the book, you know, I just continued reading, and I read through the first 164, and I got into the stories, and I just wanted to mention that briefly, because, you know, before we had internet or phones or you know, things like that, they had those stories in the back of the book so somebody could um, get a meeting, and that's essentially what those were, was a little mini speaker meeting on paper. And I read all through the stories, and every single one I found something that I could relate to. And I remember going through it with a highlighter, and, you know, I still have my original big book, and I can look back at that, and I can get a meeting anytime I want. Um, and those stories were really important to me, and they still are. So if anyone hasn't gotten into those, I would strongly recommend that you check them out, because there's a lot of good stuff in there, just from regular alcoholics telling their story of experience, strength, and hope. Um, as far as the topic for tonight that I chose, and getting free of the bondage of self, that you know, that comes from the third step. Then in the third step prayer, it says, "Relieve me of the bondage of self, so that I may better do Thy will." And, you know, that for me, that I have to get free of all that stuff that was blocking me off from my spiritual connection, so that I could be of service to others. And I couldn't help anybody if I didn't have anything to give. And in the beginning, you know, I didn't have anything to really offer, besides giving somebody a ride to a meeting. And and that's what I did. And I started getting commitments, and I was a greeter, shaking people's hands and getting to know people and making them feel welcome. And it made me feel good and made me feel part of the group. And then I started working, working through the 4-step and doing that inventory and learning a lot about myself and my relationships and the way that I had been living my life up until that point. And it was all good information, but it didn't really mean anything until I started to consciously make changes. And in the beginning, that was, just biting my tongue and not saying something when I wanted to, that extra minute to pause and think about how my actions and my words were going to affect others and the world around me. And that bondage of self takes many forms. I realized, and this is an ongoing thing, that I was completely dependent on other people's perception of me, or what they were thinking about me, or how they uh, looked at what I was doing in a positive or negative light for my own happiness. And that's no way to live, because I wasn't fully present in any given moment. I wasn't fully there, and I couldn't be fully useful to anyone, because I was my full-time job was worrying about what other people were thinking, or what how I was being looked at. And when I realized that, it didn't make that go away, but what helped with that was um, going out and going out into the world and trying to live differently and making those amends, and looking people in the eye and saying, I'm living differently today, and I'm not going to repeat those behaviors anymore. And how can I make things right? And that gave me a lot of confidence that I could change, and I could do this, and I could stay sober, and I could live differently. And I've become a completely different person in the time that I've been sober and been in the program. There's a lot more to my alcoholism than just drinking or using drugs. It's if my only problem was drinking, then putting down the drink would solve it, and I wouldn't have to do any of this. I wouldn't have to go to meetings. I wouldn't have to work steps. I wouldn't have to sponsor guys or do H&I or do any of the things that I do that sometimes are an inconvenience and I don't want to do. I wouldn't have to do those if I could just put down the drink and I'd be fine. My problem is that when I put down the drink, I can't stay away from it. I can't stay sober for long unless I'm connected to a power greater than myself. And that's the whole point of the steps. And that's the whole reason that this thing exists, is to help us build a connection with a power greater than ourselves. And I had a spiritual experience after my 5th step that carried me through, and many more since then. And through prayer and meditation, I've allowed myself to kind of quiet those voices and to be present in the moment as much as possible, and when I'm not, to at least be conscious of it and recognize those red flags and do something about it, whether that means talking to my sponsor, talking to another member of Alcoholics Anonymous that I trust, and that I can speak freely with, because we have this language here that only other alcoholics understand, and that my family didn't understand, that my friends that were non-alcoholic just couldn't relate to. And when I came to AA, you guys understood, and I could relate to you, and you could relate to me, and we could share, through our common problem, and then through our common solution. And that's the beautiful thing about this program, is it's continuous, and there's no graduation, there's no end. You don't you don't there's no cure for this, but the beautiful part of it is that I get to continue to grow as a person in this program through practicing spiritual principles in my life, and continue to learn. I used to, when I was drinking and using, I used to sit around watching the TV, cursing the world and the stuff it was, and we're so bad, and trying to convince others to think like me, and to realize now that that the best part about life is that we there's so much variety, and there's so many differences, that anywhere I go, any new experience I have, I can learn something from, and I can learn something from other people, and it keeps things exciting, and it keeps me interested in life, and interested in other people, and interested in continuing to grow spiritually, because as soon as I stop growing and stop moving forward, that's where that obsession of the mind starts to creep back in, and all of a sudden the drink sounds like a good thing. So if I'm stagnant in AA, if I'm stagnant in life, it doesn't take long for me to start to get restless, irritable, and discontent all over again. So, and this program is designed perfectly to allow us to stay busy and keep doing things. I've gone so many places that I never thought that I would go, through the connections that I made early on, and continue to make, everywhere I go, up and down the coast of California, through different states, to prisons, to conventions and conferences, to doing meetings like this online, and it really continues to blow my mind, like how far this thing reaches. I see people all across the U.S. and different countries here, and it's really cool to see this thing works no matter where you are, no matter what your situation, no matter what you're going through in life. There's someone out there that we can connect with, um, and talk about recovery, and talk about um, what we're doing today to try to stay sober, and try to give back to others. And I love just getting on the road with people, and going to meetings in other towns, and seeing how they do things, because we all do it a little bit differently. We can all every time I go there, I hear something new that I didn't know before, and I really like that. Whenever we have a visitor in my home group, we always make a point to call on them, so we can get a new perspective and hear something new, because it can get stale after a while. So it's always nice to shake things up a little bit. And I don't know where my time is, because I can't see my clock on here, but maybe you can give me a cue if I'm about done. I'll wrap it up. Otherwise, I can keep talking.
You're good.
I'm good. How much time do I have?
You should be done.
Done?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for allowing me to share with you, and I want to hear about how you break down those walls to get free of the bondage of self. And that's it. Thanks.